This is the Tata Nexon EV Max, named in honor of the reigning Formula One world champion. Okay, that's a lie. But the Tata Nexon EV is the champion among electric cars in India, finding some 19,000 owners throughout the country. But it's one thing to get to the top and another to stay there, which is where the Nexon EV Max comes into the picture. More range, more performance, more features, and of course, more money for all of this. Is it worth it? Yes, it is. And here's why. Because it looks different. It does. Okay, maybe not, because it is after all a variant of the Tata Nexon EV, not a brand new model altogether. So you still have that curvy Nexon design, blue highlights all over, halogen projector headlights, LED DRLs, and those Spider-Man inspired taillights as well. So how do you tell the Max apart from the standard Nexon EV? Well, one, you'll spot that the wheels, they're still 16-inch alloys, but the wheel design is different. And at the back, you'll spot the addition of rear wheel disc brakes. And that's not all that's gone into improving the safety credentials. ESC, traction control, hill hold, hill descent control, and tire pressure monitoring will all feature as standard kit with the Nexon EV Max. Another change on the outside, but not one that you're going to pick up that easily visibly, is a change in ground clearance. Because playing with the same dimensions, Tata has now put in a 40.5 kilowatt-hour battery pack as opposed to a 30.2 kilowatt-hour one. Of course, it's a bigger battery, so they have to maximize the space that's available. So they've stretched it out a little bit towards the outside, but of course, the one place where they won't hit some kind of block is going south. So the ground clearance has dropped by about 10 millimeters in comparison to the standard Nexon EV. And if the Nexon stance looks a bit different to you, well, you've got some eagle eyes. But more on that later. The good news is that while the battery pack has grown in size, it isn't chomping into the usable boot space, which still stands at 350 liters. That, however, isn't entirely the case inside. Remember the tall stance? Well, the Max is actually 10 millimeters taller than the standard Nexon EV. To accommodate the bigger battery better, the suspension setup has been revised and raised, which does make ingress and egress slightly trickier. And while the new battery has eaten into the ground clearance, it's also taking up more space in the floor pan itself. The gap between the seat base and floor drops, affecting your under-thigh support. The difference isn't a deal breaker, but it is noticeable versus the standard Nexon EV, and more so with the petrol or diesel versions. Good thing the Nexon space and practicality baseline was strong to begin with. So it's still a very roomy cabin, and you also got very big, almost sofa-like accommodating seats. What has changed is that now you've got a new palette of black and beige on the inside with a lighter shade of beige, which does look nicer, more premium, and makes the cabin feel more airy, but I'm not sure how well this lighter shade of beige is going to age. And that aside, you have got a lot of new features, many of which you have seen with the standard Nexon, but not the Nexon EV. So you now have front ventilated seats, there's an auto-dimming IRVM, there's an electronic parking brake with auto hold, there's a wireless phone charger, and you also have cruise control. The list also includes the great 8-speaker Harman sound system and the not-so-great 7-inch touchscreen that supports Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. The screen's resolution and touch response are acceptable at best, but considering how this Nexon now costs almost ₹20 lakh ex-showroom, acceptable shouldn't cut it anymore. To charge all this kit up, there's a standard 3.3 kilowatt AC charger, but for the impatient, there's a 50,000 rupee optional extra, a 7.2 kilowatt AC charger that takes less than half the time. Alright, we're now behind the wheel of the Nexon EV Max, and the first thing you're going to pick out on is that you have a new gear selector, the bejeweled gear selector down here, which does have a proper park mode. And once you get going, the first thing you're going to pick up on are the Regen modes. Yes, they are now adjustable, and you've got basically 4 settings: 0 where there's absolutely no regen, and level 3 where it's maximum. Now Tata does call level 3 a one-pedal mode, and in crawl traffic to some extent I would agree, but even if you come down to an absolute crawl, it's never coming to a dead stop with this mode. So I do feel like the level 3 could have been even more aggressive. That would be a true one pedal mode, like you've seen in a lot of other electric SUVs. You'll also find that the Regen doesn't quite kick in as you're easing off the throttle, but only once you're completely off it. Another change is the inclusion of drive mode. So right now, you're going to swap over.
Drive mode activated.
There's no missing what drive mode you're going to be in. So there's Eco when you're of course looking to maximize the range.
City drive mode activated.
City, which will get the job done for both city and highway use, and
Sport drive mode activated.
yes, thank you for letting me speak. Sport drive mode, where it's going to be just that little bit more fun, little bit more responsive, and give you that true electric car experience of instant torque. One interesting thing is that based on feedback that Tata has definitely received from both owners and the media in general, they've given you a proper display that's going to tell you real-time changes with the drive mode. So if I'm in Eco right now,
Economy drive mode activated.
the displayed range says 294 kilometers, but
Sport drive mode activated.
and in that it's telling me 270 kilometers. And similarly, even with the Regen modes, as you adjust them, you're going to see the displayed range change in real time, which is definitely a welcome addition and making the whole range experience just that little bit more predictable. Now, in the interest of giving the Nexon EV Max that additional range, of course, Tata has given it a bigger battery pack. But thankfully, they haven't tempered the performance to try and make sure that range is achievable or compromise the performance in some way to make that figure happen. In fact, instead of going down, they've gone up. You've got 14 additional horsepower and 5 Newton meters of torque. Now, from behind the wheel, it feels as exciting as ever. It's difficult for me to quantify what 14 additional horsepower is going to feel like in the real world, because of course, it is one motorcycle's worth of additional power, but it's also two, maybe even one heavy passenger's worth of added load because of the car's curb weight going up. Fortunately, we have sent out a test car to see just how much the data is going to tell us as a difference versus the standard Nexon EV. And the results did eventually come in, with the Max shaving half a second off its 0 to 100 time. Not that you'd feel that difference in the real world. Bottom line, it feels just as convenient to drive as before, with even the raised ride height not taking a toll on its bad road comfort or high-speed manners. The Nexon EV Max is commanding a premium of Rs 1.5 lakh over an equivalent Tata Nexon EV. And frankly speaking, it's a no-brainer. If you can make the stretch, go for it. The long-term benefits will pay off. Not only are you getting more peace of mind with the added range, especially if you do a lot of outstation trips, but you're also getting more equipment and performance that's matching up to more expensive EVs. With the Max upgrade, the improved range, and the surety of not having to be as calculative with your driving inputs, the Tata Nexon EV is making a stronger case than ever to not just be the only EV in the family, but the only car.